Hello, hello, and welcome to Millennial Notebook. My name is Stella,
And my name is Emily.
and here we talk about living life as a millennial in the modern age.
Get comfy, grab your notebook, and let's enjoy the ride together.
Hello, I hope you had a great day. How was your day, Emily?
Mine was great. How was yours?
It was good. I feel like I've been talking way too much and it's taking a strain on my voice. So if it sounds a little bit lower than usual, I hope you think of it as my sexy
We're
bed
going for the
voice.
sexy voices now, aren't we?
My
I
bed,
like a good sexy voice.
like I don't know why people perceive lower voices as more sexy. Like, why can't women who have high voices be sexy? I think it's
don't
sexy.
know. I don't find them. Yeah, I find them annoying with high voices.
Low voices? Oh, the high voices one.
Yeah. I think it's like an immaturity thing though. Like
But how high can you go? Because I feel like, I don't know, sometimes I have a very high voice.
no, mine's
anyway.
mine's generally pretty low.
It is. You have my dream bedside sexy low voice.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, Jonathan wouldn't agree.
Oh no! Let's give him a talking to. You do
Yep.
not appreciate the low voice. Kidding.
No, I think he just doesn't appreciate the sexy voice. He's like, no, it's weird. It's weird. Don't do that to me. Anyway, this is
Gosh.
what are we talking about today?
I know, right? Okay, so the topic for today is not going to be about voices. We are
Put that one on the list.
I know, right? So we are going to be talking about something that is very close and important to both of us, and that is about mental health and therapy and how it's helped with dealing with the issues that we are going through.
Yeah.
So yeah, why don't we just dive in then? Like, can you tell me a little bit about how you started therapy and when? So when, why, and how you got
Great
into
question.
therapy.
Okay, so I was a pretty staunch individual that was like, I can handle my own problems. I got this. I'm all into psychology. I love talking about brains. I know all my problems. I can fix it all. Until it basically all came crashing down on me and I broke down and I was like,
I like the description.
yeah, that's pretty much it. And it was like, I need help. I'm stuck. So that's what I did. I went to the doctor. So in New Zealand we get 6 sessions of free mental health with like a therapist or a counselor or something like that a year. So you get 6 free, which is pretty good.
Oh, that's
It's not
amazing.
great. Like, it could be better because, you know, you see someone 6 times and you still have issues. But it's still better than nothing. And we have a lot of like mental health services, which is really good. But you can get this one just by going to your GP. You go talk to your GP and you say, hey, look, I need some help. Things are not going the way I'd like them to. I just want to talk to someone, and then they can refer you. And the wait list is not too bad. Sometimes it can be up to 6 weeks, but I think I ended up waiting 3, maybe 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was basically on the person's list, and they usually got me in within 2 weeks. So I kind of saw them every 2 weeks for a couple months. And it was really good. And I did it for 6 weeks. And they also gave me some antidepressants just to sort of lift my mood. I don't take them now. I take them when things kind of skydive, because they are a bit of a perker-upper. I don't recommend this to anyone. This is not how you're supposed to do it. This is just what I find works for me. And I have reasons for that. But yeah, and so I kind of, yeah. And then when things kind of get a bit hard and like, well, basically I saw her a year later and I was just, well, maybe like a year and a half later, I saw her again, same service, same person. And then I started seeing her privately, which was costing me $130 a session. So it's not cheap.
Ah, man.
It stings a little bit, but it was kind of a priority for me to do that. And I kind of limited it to like once a month. I tried to get it every 3 weeks, once a month, just to sort of talk to someone and get some help with that. So that's kind of, that's kind of how I started in therapy. I don't currently go. It's too expensive, unfortunately. But I know it's there, and I can always reach out to this person if I feel like I need a bit of help. And I think it's kind of taken the shame a little bit away from me, for me. Like, I don't feel I don't feel shameful about going to therapy. I mean, people go to therapy for so many reasons. Like my nana passed away about 6 months ago, so that's a good reason to go and see and talk to someone, and she kind of helped me through that. It just coincidentally happened when I was going to see her. So like that's a good reason to go and see someone. It doesn't have to be something you're struggling with. But I just found that it was just good to talk to someone and just talk about things. But I did find that going once every couple of weeks probably wasn't enough to really discuss everything. Like
That's for sure.
Like there's always something I want to talk about, and it always gets derailed in another direction, and it's not always a bad thing, but I think that's the one thing I'd really like to change is the accessibility more frequently to actually really talk to someone and really deep dive into things, which you can't do in a 45-minute session. So that's kind of my that's my little dive into it. Are you gonna tell me about how you started on the old therapy train?
So I have always struggled with chronic. It's hard to say whether, because there are levels of depression, right? But I would kind of, throughout the years, I've described it as my little dark cloud, where it was a constant companion throughout the years of my life, where like the default mood was just really low, and it gets better, right? Like whenever I'm hanging out with friends, or like when life is really good. But like for as long as I can remember, probably it started when I like in high school, and then it like started to continue up until my adult life, right? And at some point after uni, when I think it comes with the quarter life crisis, where suddenly you're thrown into adult life, and there's no set path for you to try and take, and you have to make every single decision, and this decision is probably going to affect your life to some degree, and among other things, right? And I was going through a lot of other things aside from that. What I heard, the term that is used for what I'm going through is actually high functioning depression. And what that means is, you can function really well despite that kind of dark cloud that you have as a companion through life. And I have heard that people like me are actually the most vulnerable, because people don't really realize what is going inside your head and internally, and the struggles that are happening there. But I knew at some point, like so I was working, and I've realized that I can't really keep living this way anymore, because the internal dialogue in my head, and what I mean by that is just, I think everyone has an inner critic in their minds, where for example, you want to go for a dream, and then the voice inside your head is like, who am I to be able to do that, like, right? And it just got so loud that it was quite debilitating. And one of the ways that I found was most effective at that time to deal with it was drinking. I just got out of a really I was dating someone I found very special at that time, and he was the first guy I dated quite seriously, and it didn't work out. And so aside from my high functioning depression, right, it was like all of these life experiences that were kind of crashing down me all at once. And I didn't want to fall deeper into that hole that I felt like I was kind of just sinking into. And I love psychology. Like, it's something I would have wished I could have studied if I wasn't pressured into taking business by my parents.
I'm the same. I love psychology. I still wouldn't mind doing some psychology courses there.
Exactly. And I think it's because of this that I believe that I knew that therapy was something that could have that could definitely help me.
Yeah.
And with the interest came with like this constant hunger of seeking information related to psychology, therapy, and how the human mind works.
Yeah.
And I just knew that this was probably one of the ways that I could deal with the inner demons, right, that I was experiencing. And it was at that time, because I live in Japan, in Tokyo, and I wanted to be able to speak with a therapist who spoke my language, which is primarily English. And I'm so thankful for technology that they brought out apps like that put a lot of therapists in a more accessible situation, right? No matter where you are. And I have used a quite famous therapy app
Yeah.
that is based in America. And although I wasn't able to continue that for several reasons that I will discuss, I suppose, later, but and I'm seeing a different therapist now, not through the platform,
Yeah.
but I ultimately that was when I decided that I needed to take it, and that was, I think it's been 2 years since my therapy, since my very first therapy session. And I have not looked back since. I think
Wow.
it was one of the best decisions of my life. And the things that I was going through at that time are much less prominent now. And yeah, so that was that.
Yeah. That's
So
pretty cool. That's awesome.
yeah. On that note, though, like, can you tell me a little bit more about like the struggles that you are currently facing or have faced, and if you have a diagnosis?
Oh, okay. So, in my family we have depression. I think it's, yeah. My dad and my brother both have it, or at least that's what I've been told. So it was pretty, when I kind of presented to therapy, they pretty much were like, well, yeah, you've got depression, obviously. And I was like, well, duh, I'm depressed as hell. And it was obvious to me. And it was just something I couldn't shake. Like, I've had this my entire life. Like you said, teenage life. Like, I'm talking pre-teen life.
Oh.
I've had like ups and downs, but I'm a bit the same. I'm like high functioning. I can kind of get around it, but I would just, it seemed to be on like a yearly to 2 yearly thing. I would just like go through these peaks and valleys and like have these really low lows and like really high highs where like I'm like loving life and having a great time, but then it would sink and I'd just be like, what is the point of anything? But you just have to get on with life. And I grew up with a brother who has he's not high functioning depression. He is probably major depression, or at least that's what he was diagnosed as a teenager.
Yeah.
And so I watched him go through the whole thing, and that kind of discolored my whole idea of mental health. I didn't want to be associated with what he was going through, the way he was treated. So I hid pretty much all of my lows. I tried my best to hide it. And I remember a few times, like, I just couldn't hide it. And I didn't want to get out of bed. Like, and this was like preteen. Like, I was still pretty much primary school to intermediate. And I've always had this feeling of like, I'm not the same as everyone else. Everyone else has just got everything sorted. Like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I'm quirky, I'm different. And that came with a lot of anxiety. So I developed anxiety, which I didn't really get. It didn't really get that bad until like in the last couple of years, especially since, well, I would say that going to Japan and doing all these amazing things and then coming home was like the catalyst for a lot of things.
Right.
And why the main reason I went to therapy, because I just came crashing down. It was like the highest high of my life. It was like a mixed emotion experience that just threw me through, and it was a dream come true at 25 or 26. That basically threw me. Then when I came home, it was like a huge crash. And maybe like a burnout even. Like, It's just a whole mixture of things that happened. I'm still dealing with it now. where like I had everything figured out, everything was good, and like it all just came crashing down. But in that time since I came back, and now I've done a lot of psychology on myself. I wouldn't recommend it, but you tend to look at your own brain and you start to see patterns and things. And I hate to say it was thanks to TikTok that I started to look into ADHD, which I would never in a million years would have thought of it. But there's just so many things that people portray in terms of like the things they experience and things that you relate to that I've never come across when it comes to anxiety and depression. Yes, I relate to things when it comes to anxiety and depression. I think everyone can relate in some level of those swings, of those the anxious feeling you get, of the negative thoughts that you get, all of those things that come with those. But like the way that I go on such roller coasters in terms of like, if I didn't do the research, which I did, into like something like bipolar, you would think it's bipolar because of the huge highs and the huge lows. But it's not bipolar. I've looked into it. I'm a smart human being. It's definitely not bipolar as far as I'm aware. But something like ADHD just makes a lot of sense. So I'm currently seeking a diagnosis for that, which is a beast in itself. But it explains a lot. And so that's my current, I think, diagnosis. But
Right.
and the things that come with that are like I have really I can't focus. Huge mood swings is a huge issue. Like super high functioning and then super low functioning. Belts of things. I'm all over the place. And things are getting better now. But I think it's only getting better because now I understand what I think I'm going through.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what my diagnosis is. I hope. I'm sure it'll be on, be like, oh, damn, well, it's not that. If it comes back, negative sort of thing. But at the same time, I think I'm dealing with things better because I have an understanding of what I think I'm going through and the techniques that work, that people have these experiences I do.
Yeah.
Like, it works for me. So that's what matters, right?
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of, mindfulness. I'm just being a lot more aware of myself and just like, I get excited when I learn new things about myself, instead of being like, oh, there's something else I can tick off the list that's wrong with me. It's more so like, oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
So I think it keeps me, those things that click and go, oh my God, that makes a lot of sense. They just kind of keep me moving forward. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is the issue. I think I know I can fix it. And like 95% of the time, it's worked. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
I see. That's really interesting. And I'm really proud of you for, being able to overcome, the primary struggles that you had prior. And I'm sure you're still going through them. And, the fact that you're able to keep going, right? And, you're achieving so much despite what you're going through. So I'm really, let me just say that I'm really proud of you for fighting on. Let's live this life together.
I don't believe you, but thank you.
Oh, come on. Anyway, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So what are you currently struggling with that you find that therapy is still helping you with, and like how are you dealing with it?
Yeah. So I still have high functioning depression, and one of the ways that I actually found out that I could have that I possibly may have it, and circling back to what I said about how I started therapy, is because the internet, thank God for the internet, and I didn't really expect to see it there, but like seeing other people post about this, and also like follow a lot of therapists on Instagram, and they post about it, and I didn't realize that it was an actual thing, because I perceive depression as this all-consuming thing where you're in bed all day, and
Right.
you're crying all the time, or you just have no drive to do anything, and that wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily true for me. I did have bouts, I constantly push myself, but I don't necessarily feel very alive in doing so, and I only
Yeah.
realized that not everyone felt this way. I actually assumed everyone felt this way,
Yeah.
until I started talking to people about how their general mood was, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm not very sad. I'm not really sad most of the time. I'm okay most of the time," is what they say, and it came as a shock to me when I had these conversations with my friends, because I was just like, oh, not everyone is sad all the time, or and it started to make more sense when this term of like high functioning depression came to light, and then I identified with it, and I'm still struggling with it, honestly. And on days that it's difficult, it's really difficult, but I think cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yep.
CBT, is what I'm going through right now with my therapist, has
Yep.
helped so much with my condition. And the reason for that is because a lot in CBT, it is believed that your mind and what goes through it affects your behavior. And by
Mm.
changing your mind, and the way you think about things, ultimately you're also able to slowly shift your behavior as well. I'm not a therapist. Sorry, I do not have a very eloquent explanation of that one. But in any case, um, the struggles of like having what we call in therapy the inner critic, and what
Mm.
I lightly mentioned a while ago, the voices in your head. And
Yeah.
I don't mean schizophrenia kind of voices. Literally just the voice that tells you that you can't do something,
Yep.
or your inner critic, basically.
The one that doubts, the fear, oh no,
Yes.
you shouldn't do that. Oh,
Yeah.
could you really do that? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
It's
sometimes not
just
even it's sometimes not even a cognitive thought. It's just a feeling of like, yeah, and like something will be like, it'll come to mind of like, but you failed that time, and you'll be like,
yeah,
oh, you're right, I did fail that time, so maybe I'll fail this time. So yeah, I
exactly.
get that. Like that is when my brain is just wired, it is
Yeah.
like that 24/7, and it's so hard to be present in the moment when your head is
Mm-hmm.
just constantly talking to you, or you're like
Yes.
telling you things, and like you're trying your best just to be like, I gotta get this thing done, but my head's telling me I've got like 100 other things in my brain. So yeah, and sometimes like CBT is obviously really good
Yeah.
because, and it is a practice. Like you have to, sometimes it takes like a journal practice of like, oh, my head thought this, I'm going to write it down.
Yeah.
And then you have to logically, which is sometimes really hard when you're an emotional person, to be like,
Yes.
that's not correct. I have no evidence for that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I
Yes.
think
Yes.
that, why do I think that? And what's that being sparked by? And how can I tell it to go away? And sometimes just the act of writing it down is really good.
True.
And sometimes you can do it on your, well, you get better at it, and sometimes you can do it in your head and be like, I see you thought, I see you, and no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think this is one of the gifts of therapy, is that it helps you be a little bit more mindful, self-aware,
Yeah.
and kind of like, I don't know, it gives you a little bit of like a view inside your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's with me. So on that, like, what's the experience of life for you then? Like, what's it like having
What's it
the
like being me?
condition having the condition that, like, so you mentioned ADHD. What's that like?
So most people will know it as, most people, so it's kind of going through a huge shift thanks to a lot of advocates in the circle, who, it used to be little boys hyperactivity syndrome. The kids are acting up all the time, running around, so much energy, always talking,
Mm-hmm.
disruptive, little boys, right?
Yeah.
But With thanks to a lot of research in the field, like there's something that they call inattentive ADHD, which is the daydreamer, someone who's a little bit more quiet, but more reserved. Perhaps you don't see it. It's not outwardly out there, and it's typically women. So typically women, they don't usually get diagnosed until their late teens, even until they're like 50s sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it usually comes when they have children, because that's when, so ADHD stands for, I can't remember. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Okay.
But it's actually probably closer to a executive dysfunction disorder, or an executive function disorder, in which all of your executive functions, the things you use to organize, the things you use to time keep, the things you use to everyday life stuff, to be somewhere on time, to organize yourself, to run a household, that to run businesses. Those are all things that require a lot of executive functions. That is a lot of competing priorities and all this sort of stuff. And essentially, a better way to look at the disorder is that it impacts all of that, and it also has an emotional component to it too. So it's a lot of things that are kind of important for adulting. Which is why a lot of women, particularly those who have kids, like as soon as they have kids, it's just like, oh my God, why am I so behind the 8 ball all the time? And like they just get overwhelmed, and that's usually how they find out they have it. Or their kids present with it and they go, wait, I thought that was normal. Wait, my kid's not doing normal things? Like I do that. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's not normal. It's because it is a genetic, it's like a 30% chance, like 50% really? Chance of giving it to your children. So if your child has it, you'll likely have it as well. So, really interesting, really fascinating disorder. And it's like a biophysical, so it's like an actual shrinking of the frontal cortex. This is why I know I have ADHD, because I know a lot about a specific topic, which is kind of like it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
I think it's also because you're really smart, but
well, I wouldn't say I'm really I'm smart about things that I'm really interested in, and that's kind of where it all comes into. But
I see.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, it's all very interesting. But it comes with things like, it comes with depression and anxiety as well, because a lot of women, because their failings of the things that everyone else can do, the organization, doing all the housework, doing all these things that require a lot of executive functions, when women start to realize that they're behind everyone, that's when they develop anxiety about it. That's when the depression happens, because they just get overwhelmed and they think that they aren't good enough, So it's a very, very, it's a very complex thing. Anyway, what were we talking about?
The experience of, okay, so
that's my experience of life.
And that was actually a very good example. I think like the fact that you like to go off tangent is a manifestation of it. So
it is, yeah.
I love it though. It's very
Especially
funny.
when I'm really excited about it. It's something I'm really excited about. Because it's so interesting.
Yeah, and it's great. I love it. Okay, thank you for that. On my note, high functioning depression feels like, I feel like I am an engine that keeps on moving despite being low on fuel. It's probably the best way that I can describe that. And the reason why I'm moving is because of societal pressures, my own pressures on myself. But it's like I'm being pushed behind me. I'm doing my best to move by myself, but also like without that extra push, I'm probably just gonna like die in the middle of the road. And that's how it feels like, right? And as I've touched on a little bit a while ago, it felt like I had a dark cloud over my head for several years throughout my life, and it felt like a constant companion almost. And it's something that I just like learned to deal with, and it's gotten better by kind of shifting my perspective, because what I've learned through CBT is that a lot of my perspectives on life has actually contributed to that dark cloud, right? Like seeing,
Mm.
um, having very little hope of the future, and
Mm.
seeing very little meaning in the daily grind and all of
Yeah.
these things. But what I've learned is that to be able to kind of um, work around that is to find little pieces of hope
Mm.
and some things that I can look forward to, so that I can kind of pull myself out of the cloud whenever necessary. And
Yeah.
that's literally what is um, pushing the train to go forward, right? Despite the very kind of the low fuel that I have, right? So,
Yeah.
you find elements that will help keep pushing you forward despite being very low on fuel.
Did you find it easier when you were younger to keep the train going? Did you find it easier as a younger person to see the next thing, the next
Oh
exciting thing?
yeah. Yes, yes. And
Yeah.
I think I attribute it to, I mean, generally, like when you're young, you kind of are more hopeful because,
Yeah.
I mean, a part of it is innocence, not knowing how terrible the world can be.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound pessimistic right now, but then, that's how it was,
I
right?
mean,
Like,
it is. Like, if you're realistic about the world, it's not a great place, especially at the moment. Like, and
exactly.
as you get older, you have less of those experiences that make life exciting. You haven't got the uni to look forward to. You haven't got your first job
Exactly.
to look forward to. You don't have, um, those experiences become few and far between, and it becomes, especially when you start working, it becomes the daily grind of like,
Yeah.
you go to work, you come home. You go to work,
Yeah.
you come home. Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So that's how it's been like for me. But anyway, but how do you think has therapy helped you? And what role do you think it played in your life now that we know what it is like to have ADHD and, for me, like high functioning depression? How do you think it's impacted your life?
Interesting. I think it's nice knowing that it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I've experienced it, I'm not fearful of it. All that stigma's kind of gone. You're just like, feeling a bit shitty. Probably should go back to therapy. It's gonna, because it does help. And it's just sometimes all you need is just to talk to someone who's
Yeah.
experienced, who perhaps, especially the person I go and see, is very good at just going, well, this is the logical stuff. This is what you're going through. How can we switch it around? How can we fix it? And depending on the mood that I'm in, sometimes it's like, oh, fix it. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I can't help. Like, I don't know. And then sometimes it's like, oh, you got a point there. Okay. And sometimes you can, actually understand what they're saying, or it doesn't really sink into a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it's just good to know that it's there. I don't worry about it. Like, I'll tell people I've been to therapy. Like, everyone should go to therapy. It's good.
Exactly.
If you find someone who's good, then it's worth going. But yeah, I don't know. I find it's just nice to know that it's there and I can use it. It is expensive, but it is there and it will help me when I need it. So, yeah.
So do you think it's helped you to be a little bit more focused, or is it mostly just helping you being able to identify what you're going through, and then that paves the way to finding tools to kind of solve or kind of help ease whatever you're going through?
Yes. Say it again.
Sorry. Okay, so do you think that therapy has given you the tools to identify what you're going through and, somehow help you to be able to solve them if they're solvable? Like, do you
Right.
think that paved the way toward that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I think I'm more receptive to, because I don't want to say I do a lot of self-help, but it's a lot of self-therapy. I mean, you have to in some capacity. Like, you can't rely on someone to do all the work for you all the time.
Yeah.
Even
Actually,
though it's
therapy
really,
is, yeah, it's focused on you, actually. You have to do the work, so it's not self.
yeah.
Yeah.
but let's just say that a therapist in whatever capacity, counselor or psychologist, psychiatrist, they're not there to, pave the way. They're just there to facilitate you paving the way. So, they do give a lot of tools and stuff. And so I use that, and I use that as a, going to therapy is one tool that sometimes it's nice to externalize everything you're thinking, but it also, they should, they should give you tools back. And I guess those tools are things that I use more daily or perhaps more weekly, or just when I'm going through those low periods, I tend to go back on those tools and go, oh yeah, no, that can help and this can help. And yeah. So I guess it's nice to have had someone confirm, sometimes some of the things you're thinking and feeling, and confirming that they're actually not real. Not to say they're not real, like everyone has fears and concerns and things, but perhaps
they're not as real as they feel like at the time.
Yeah, like it's nice to have someone acknowledge that you're going through something and that is difficult, but there is a way through it. And yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that.
What about yourself?
For me, like, I think so. My high functioning depression was actually triggered by several factors of the way I thought, is what I was able to identify through therapy. And I found out that it's I'm a recovering perfectionist and a recovering people pleaser. Mm-hmm. And basically all of, like, these two things in particular are actually external forms of validation, and we have very little control of, and it was contributing to my overall happiness. And maybe what we've identified is probably one of the primary reasons as to why I was kind of always in a low mood, because there is no pleasing every single person that you encounter, right? And perfection is a myth, right? What is perfection anyway? And you can never really say what is perfect, because every single person has their own definition of what is 100% and what is good, right? It's very easy to quantify things and elements outside of the human experience, but when it comes to being human and what it is about, what it takes to be the best human being, or whatever that even means, there's no definition that is 100% true, right? It's very subjective. And moving away from that, I felt like had given me a lot of leeway to just relax, because I felt like I've been keeping myself in such a tight kind of, I don't want to say noose, right? You've been
tightly wound.
Yeah, in general. And like I felt like I was keeping myself in a box that I no longer fit in.
Yep.
And aside from that, I felt like it helped me deal with my inner critic, as mentioned a while ago. And ultimately, it's helped give me inner peace, and even help prevent alcoholism. I think I was very, very near the borderline of like crossing becoming an alcoholic at that stage in my life when I started therapy, because literally I could not silence the inner critic in my head. It was screaming at me at that time, and literally I could only not hear it when I was very busy with work or when I was drinking, right?
Yeah, which is kind of that whole idea of like workaholics, right? Workaholics work so much to compensate or to try and silence something. And alcoholism is just one form of dealing with that, right? You drink to forget, or you drink to numb it. Which I'll be honest, I did the same thing. I drink to numb it sometimes too.
Yeah.
And it's
a journey.
It's easy to do. I hate to say it, but sometimes I just want to have a good night, and sometimes I'll drink and it'll be, good. But yeah, I get that though. And some people will self-medicate with other things too. They'll do weed or drugs or
sex, food.
Sex, food, shopping.
Yeah. There are so many ways in which
To
these
fill the
things
void, I
manifest.
guess.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it saved me from that. Actually, I was very close to crossing the borderline there, and I was able to pull myself out of that, and which was great,
Yeah.
thanks to therapy. It also helped prevent burnout. Well, or even if I'm already burnt out from my job, it helps to kind of pull me out of that, help me recover a little bit, because I never
Mm.
really realized how burnt out I was until my therapist pointed it out that I was burnt out.
Yeah.
And, she gave me the tools to be able to kind of like find small pieces of peace throughout my day so that I can find kind of like recharge throughout the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
I found myself, because, before my therapist pointed it out, I found myself kind of stressing about work when I wasn't working, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of stole away what could have been chances for me to recover,
Yeah.
right?
You time. You time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even realize that until she pointed it out, right? Because I thought it was normal to be so stressed about work even while I was sleeping, and then I wake up and then I'd be like, oh, fuck, I have an hour until work and all of
Yeah.
these things. So yeah, finally I just let myself not think about work in those moments because it's my time,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then lastly, like, I feel like it helped me to just become a little bit more vulnerable and just be me, because a lot of the perfectionism and kind of, recovering from people pleasing, right? I kind of let myself be molded by society,
Mm.
and I never really felt comfortable enough to share with the world, or with even with my friends. I found out, completely share who I was and myself,
Mm.
because I was afraid of like upsetting people.
Yeah.
And therapy has showed me that, the your true friends will accept you.
Yeah.
I mean, given that you're not being like a jerk, right? Like,
Yeah. Just have,
so
because just you have mental health issues does not excuse you from being a jerk.
exactly.
Just because you're like,
I
well, I got depression, so if you all, it's like, no.
Yes, like so uh yeah, some people have a very bad image of people with mental illness, because there
Yeah.
are some people who kind of use it as a scapegoat, right?
As a
They'd be
crutch.
like,
Yeah.
as a crutch, yeah, and they'd be like, oh, I'm a shitty person because I'm going through ABC. And that's
Yeah.
fine that you're going through this. It's not something you can control, but what you can control is like how much you're affecting
Others. Yeah.
others, right? Because you can go through your own shit and not have to hurt other people in the process.
I think it's really hard. I think there's a double standard even in that. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to burden people with your issues. So
Yeah,
you don't talk
that's another
about
thing,
it.
right? It's
You
so
don't talk
hard.
about it, therefore
Yeah.
you're not getting through it, therefore you end up burdening yourself and it gets
Yeah.
worse. So I think it's getting much better with society now because we are getting more open. We're getting better at talking about it. Therefore, it puts the pressure off the individual. People are
Yeah.
being better at receiving this sort of information. Like they know how to respond correctly. They know how to
Exactly.
help you. Like if someone comes to me now and says, "Look, I'm really depressed and I just can't."
Yeah.
Like I'd be like, I know how to respond to that. One, I have similar issues. A lot of people
Yeah.
have similar issues, and like you just, yeah, you. I think we're getting better as a society at, hopefully not bottling it up. But if you're someone who is still in that kind of, I don't want to say closet, but you're still in that shelter of like, I don't want anyone to know my problems and blah blah blah. Then, yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think ultimately, and we circle back to self-awareness, and therapy really does help with that, right? Like if you
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
it's very hard to identify whether you're actually just being vulnerable and experiencing what it is being a human being going through a tough time versus being
Yeah.
a jerk, right? I think your therapist, if they're a good therapist, they'll probably call you out on it and be like, nope. It's one thing opening up to your friends, and then another thing to kind of like, be
Attack
really
them
toxic.
or-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, that's self-awareness. That's where it plays a role, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, we are not therapists. So just
But
disclaimer there.
we're people with issues,
Yeah.
and like, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can relate, and
Exactly.
there is a lot to be said about self-help too. So.
Exactly. On that note, I think society is still scratching the surface when it comes to accepting therapy and mental health. And what do you think about the stigma that is surrounding therapy and mental health? Like, I'm pretty sure it depends on the culture. It varies per country.
Yeah.
What is it like for you over there in New Zealand?
I mean, it's still something that in the workplace I wouldn't bring up to my bosses.
Oh, yeah.
But I have brought up to my colleagues. Like, I've brought up being like, oh, well, I think I got ADHD. But it was like a spin-off conversation about something else, I think. And I tend to overshare. It's just me. I like to overshare. Because I'm really interested in some things. But, like, you know, I still probably wouldn't, like, I tell them probably, let's just say I told them about ADHD because I thought it was really interesting. And I wanted to sort of dispel any myths, essentially. And it's kind of interesting human experience. But that being said, I definitely wouldn't go into the sort of detail about my depressive episodes and my anxiety and stuff, because that's, I guess people see that as more debilitating. And I definitely want to bring it up to my bosses because, again, this whole like societal pressures of working and efficiency. Like, if you told them that you have depressive episodes, they're gonna be like, she's not a good worker anymore because, you know, she's got a few issues. But like, so does everyone.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's but with probably people that I'm on the same page with, you know, my female colleagues who are about the same age as me, like, I'd be happy to talk to them about it because I can see that they're receptive and they also talk to me about it. So
Yeah.
it's not a one-way conversation. Like, we are having a discussion. But I guess when you start to think about the hierarchical structures of society,
Yeah.
it gets trickier. Like, and like, just some people just don't get it, you know? Like, I definitely wouldn't have this discussion with my mother.
Yeah.
Even though she has a son who had, you know, major depression and still deals with him, you know, having a few episodes here and there with stresses of life, obviously. And but perhaps I would have this discussion with one of my brothers, or, you know, because we'd have a mutual discussion because we both kind of go through similar issues. So I feel like there's still a while to go, but I also feel like, you know, everyone's privy to their own privacy. You know, everyone's got their own, you know, everyone's allowed to have their own struggles and not have to disclose that to people, perhaps your employer and things. So, but it would be nice, I think, if there was more support within the workplace. I mean, because let's be honest, everyone's in the workplace. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We work. It'd be nice if there was more support in the workplace to be like, hey, look, I can see you're having a hard time. Go and take a few days off, or we'll help you with therapy or whatever, without the stigma of like, you're not good enough, like you're broken and you need fixing sort of thing. Like, it's just a, hey, look, I can see things aren't going so well. Just take some time off. And I wish that was better and more and better received.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I have actually quite a good workplace. But it can still be better, you know? It can still be better.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it's quite different in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, stigma. So I have two perspectives on this because I am a Filipino, right? I grew up in Manila, and Manila, the Philippines, has a lot of like Western influence, and we have a lot of like we adhere to a lot of like American cultural concepts, and what is because we do consume a lot of American media.
Yeah.
So there's that perspective, and also the perspective of living and working in Japan. So let me like work through that per category. So first, in the Philippines, it's mental health is definitely, there's still so much, there's still a long way to go, and it's very like therapy is very hard to access, and a lot of people still feel a lot of shame with it.
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot of my friends talking about it or sharing about it. I remember when I was still living there that I had a hard time finding a therapist as well, and just the thought of like having to drive there, literally physically go there,
Yeah.
and like say my family finding out
Mm.
kind of gave me a lot of shame,
Yeah.
which is strange. It's such a strange concept for me now that I've been, going through therapy for about, like, collectively about a year and a half already, and I feel zero shame about it. If anything, I want everyone to go through it, therapy,
Mm.
because it's been such like a guiding light for me. But yeah, there was a lot of shame there still. I remember I tried talking to my sister about it because she was going through a lot as well, and she was just like,
Yeah.
she was just like, "Oh, that's great for you. I don't know. I'm not comfortable talking to strangers," is what
Mm.
the first thing she said.
Yeah.
And aside from, the stigma there, it's just the cost is another consideration, right?
Mm.
The Philippines is a developing country, so it can be very expensive. There is no national healthcare system that is reliable enough
Mm.
to support these things. So that's on the stigmas in the Philippines. So it's still there's still a long way to go, and it's really unfortunate because, like, for example, I have uh, a niece-in-law. I don't know if that's an actual term, but like because of my
Niece.
sister's like technically, like, I'm not really related to her, but because my sister got married to, like, so her husband, right, and her husband has a niece, so technically, like, she is now our niece,
Oh.
but by
Right.
law. So
Gotcha.
she has she's very young, like, so she's 3 years old, and then I think by the time we realized that she was going through it, she was 5 or 6, that she had schizophrenia.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and she was kind of like, there was a lot of fear around it, and her
Right.
mom wouldn't let her take medication because of
Uh.
the stigma that comes with being labeled as someone with a mental health
Yeah.
disorder. And it's unfortunate because people, I suppose it was also like a generational difference, right?
Mm.
But like her mom didn't want her to be labeled as quote unquote what people back, like, sorry, like,
Crazy.
yeah, I didn't want to
Yeah.
say it because it's so
Yeah.
unfair.
It is, but yeah.
Yeah, and she and I, like, we couldn't really do anything about it because her being so young, she needed her mother's
Right.
approval.
Yeah.
Her parents are divorced, so her dad had, like, I think it wasn't shared custody, so it was literally
Mm.
on only on her mother's hands, and her mother
Wow.
wasn't having any of it.
Ooh.
So you can imagine, like, how, oh my goodness, like, it's, yeah. Anyway, so
Mm.
there's that. And in Japan, it's rarely talked about, and if you have any kind of extreme mental health disorder where it affects you physically, you will
Mm.
get checked into a facility
Yeah.
where sometimes I've heard of, like, a horror story of and this probably didn't go out in mainstream media, but someone who came here to teach as an ALT,
Yes, the
um
foreigner he was a Kiwi.
really, like, he was strapped to the bed because
Yeah.
he stopped taking his medication,
Yeah.
consciously stopped taking his medication, and then he, of course, that's when he spiraled, right? And
Yeah.
then none of the Japanese doctors knew what to do with him, and so literally they just strapped him to the bed. And
Yeah.
when his brother came to visit him, like, his skin was all red and welting because of, like, all the struggle, and then was like, what the fuck are you doing to my brother?
Yeah, I think it was a Kiwi guy. Really, really tragic.
Oh, yeah.
Awful story. But yeah, I didn't know the full story, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it was because someone in my circle shared it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of stigma there. Actually, like, I kind of hesitate bringing up therapy to any Japanese person who hasn't
Mm.
traveled abroad or hasn't had a lot of like, or not even just travel abroad, like with an international mindset.
Right.
Um, Thankfully, a lot of my Japanese friends are very, very open minded and are very smart and kind people. And so
Yeah.
I've never had any issues of like opening up about my struggles with therapy and
Yeah.
like mental health.
Well, you wouldn't be friends with them otherwise.
That is true. But anyway, just to give you an idea, like it's really, really, it's not that great. And I just heard from my friend a while ago that apparently in Japan, you can work as a therapist without a license. You don't even have to have a degree.
Ooh.
Isn't that crazy? And my heart bleeds for all the people who are kind of looking for support and then they find themselves in the office of a
Yeah.
quack
Being duped.
therapist.
Yeah.
Right. So, but even then, right, like the stigma is still very much there. And
Yeah.
I hope that through conversations like this, like these, that we can kind of show to people that people like us, like Emily and I are, as you can see, we're very normal and we are very much living life, very full lives, and we benefit so much from therapy. And mental health is something that is very important and every single person should seriously consider, because like if you're bleeding or if you have a broken leg, you go to a doctor. So why can't we do the same for mental illness, whether it's something as minor as you getting anxious for a specific life event to something as major as a hormonal imbalance in your head, right? That you have to literally have someone help balance for you. Literally, that's it. It's not about being crazy and all of that. It's literally like it's a biological thing sometimes.
Yeah.
That someone can help you go through, and it's not a bad thing. It's literally you just need help, it's as if you broke your leg, right?
Yeah. It's the same. The sooner we can get to the same sort of conclusion that mental health and physical health are just as important to each other, the better. And like I think we'll all be better off when we can get to that point. But I think the more people talk about it, the more people will talk about it. Then the more people might get help.
Exactly. And the stigma, hopefully the stigma will start to lessen the more that people talk about it, and the more that we realize that it's there to help you.
I think with Gen Z and millennials, moving up in the world and the way that we're changing and disrupting things, I reckon it's going to be just part of, health insurance,
I hope so.
I think I truly hope that. And if not, then I'll be one of the people who makes it part of my company.
Oh, I love it. Same here. Okay, on that note, so to wrap up, how about how do you think people can get access to therapy and mental health services?
Well, here in New Zealand, you can go to your GP if you haven't already, and you can get 6 free mental health therapy sessions. That said, like Stella said earlier, you can go online. There are some apps that help you. There's a lot of self-help apps. Just read the recommendations, see what people recommend. There are some fantastic registered psychologists on social media that can help you, just maybe not to help you specifically, but you can learn a lot through them. Some really awesome people on YouTube that do a lot of videos. But I guess I would always recommend that you within your health system, if it's possible, just talk to your GP, talk to your doctor, and just be honest about what's going on. And I think you'll find that a lot of people going through very similar things. So just talk. Yeah.
And if you feel like you're in a culture or in a space where your GP won't necessarily be open-minded about these things, because there are some doctors who actually kind of do not, it's so strange, isn't it? Like even in the
Yeah.
medical community, some people don't acknowledge it as an actual thing
Yeah.
that needs to be kind of discussed and even treated with therapy or medication if necessary. But if you don't feel safe, there are, as Emily mentioned, there are platforms online. Like there are a lot of therapists that you can find online. That, I mean, the laws. I'm pretty sure that there are some laws that some of these therapists have to abide by. Like for example, what I learned that in America there are some therapists that are only limited to practice in their state.
Right.
But in any case, like the apps that Emily mentioned, there are a lot of like online therapy apps, and behind these apps are registered psychologists, counselors, and psychiatrists that may be able to help you. And some of them are not limited to their state, so they can help you go through your issues online anywhere you are in the world. And that's how I began my therapy journey, right? Like my
Yeah.
therapist was American, and we found a very good time slot for us. So there's that. And then honestly, sometimes it's even good to ask around in your friend group.
Yep.
You'd be surprised how maybe some of your friends are already going through therapy themselves, and that's
Yep.
how I found my current therapist, and she's wonderful. Yeah, or like, if you feel like that's too big of a step for you, you can just Google and then see, some like get as much knowledge as you can about mental
Arm
health
yourself
online.
with knowledge.
Exactly.
Yep.
Because it's an actual thing, and it's not just in your head, and it's going to be okay.
Yes, I
what
can
I want
vouch
you
for
to
that.
know.
It is going to
Yeah.
be okay.
It's going to be okay. You are not alone. We're all going through this shitty life.
Yeah.
And we will all survive it together.
Yeah.
And okay, last, the cost and justification of it. What do you think about this one?
Well, justification is easy. Because if you're like me and you let it go for too long, it could get worse. So, address it when you can. Yeah, like it's been worth every penny, in my opinion.
I agree.
And it does hurt the bank a little bit, I will admit, but there's ways around that. You can push it out, go every month as opposed to every week, and
Yeah.
just really soak in all the help you can get while you're there, and yeah, so it's worth every penny, in my opinion, if you can afford it. But I understand that, yeah, not everyone's in that situation. But yeah, what's been like on your end?
Yeah, so this was one of my primary problems when I was still living and was based in the Philippines. Cuz the cost can be quite high, especially coming from, like, for example, a developing country.
Right. Yeah.
But there are ways to move around that, and what I mean is, like, for example, what Emily kind of suggested, right? To space it really far in between your sessions, like space a lot of time in between that, so that you can kind of, because therapy is a process. It cannot be rushed. So spreading it out, if you can't afford a weekly session, is definitely your best bet, because it's a journey, right? You can't change your thought patterns in an instant.
Yeah.
So you can do that. Sometimes you can find therapists who give, for example, recommendation kind of, I don't want to call it a discount, but like sometimes if you're a friend of their current client, sometimes the cost is referral. Discount? There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, a referral discount. Sometimes you can get that. Sometimes there are therapists that give it pro bono, depending on. So I heard that I have a friend of mine. was able to access therapy for free because her university provides it, and that's
Oh, there you
wonderful.
go.
Yeah, so you like sometimes so you can explore, like maybe your university already provides it for free. It's very hard to determine whether that the therapists that are associated with the school will be the best, but you know, it's one of the ways you can try to explore it. Um but yeah, so that's for free. And then another one is like the apps that I've mentioned. There are a bunch. Maybe we can talk
We can link
about.
them.
Yeah,
We can
talk.
link them below.
Yeah, so I use BetterHelp,
Mm-hmm.
and there are mixed reviews, but if you find a really good therapist, I think it's worth trying out therapy through that platform because you know, the more sessions you book ahead of time, the cheaper it gets, and it's really accessible, right? You do it online, and so at that time, it was one of the most cost-effective solutions I had.
Yeah.
So yeah, and on that note, Emily mentioned a while ago, it was worth every penny.
Yeah.
Your mental health is an investment, and at the end of the day, you all of the things that are happening around you and all of the friends and family that you have, literally, you at the end of the day, you only have yourself. And if you are at a constant war with yourself, then that's a very fast path toward destruction. And so it's really hard to justify your the expense at first, especially if you are not used to going to therapy yet, and if you're just getting your feet wet in the whole process. But know that it's gonna be worth it. And if you feel that your therapist is not the right one for you, then
Move
don't
on. Find someone else.
Yes, don't give up. Like, don't give up on therapy, but rather like
Yeah.
move on to the next one, because sometimes it takes a bunch of trial and
'Cause
error.
it's a relationship, right?
It is.
And like you got to find someone who vibes with your, you know, your relationship.
Exactly. And sometimes there are certain therapists that have, so aside from the vibe, like they have specialties.
Yes,
And
that's important too. Yeah.
yeah, and like for example, for me, I am more comfortable with women than I am with men, especially with these things. So, you know, like there's so many considerations that you can tailor toward your own preferences so that you can feel like you're making a good investment, because this is your hard-earned money. Or, you know, if you're very young and it's from your parents, right? It's an investment. So you should honor yourself enough to find one that makes it feel worth it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anyone is having a hard time, please reach out. You are not
Yes.
alone. We will send in resources down below if you are going through a tough time. Mental illness is a real thing. Depression is a real thing. And please don't give up. All right?
Yeah.
So we love you guys. Thank you so much for listening. You are not alone, and we will get through this together. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right. See you guys next time. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.